Greetings, welcome to another episode of the Many Hats of Coco, and we are once again at the Tronson Art Gallery in Springfield, and today I'm really excited to bring up an author from Portland. He came down to join us from Portland by the name of Tim Savage. Tim, come on in and join me.
Thank you, Theo.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
So I've got to say, I'm going to hold this book for a minute because...
Is this my wine or is this someone...
This is a brand new glass.
Fantastic.
Would you like a...
Don't mind if I do.
Tim brings his own bottle.
I was hoping I wouldn't have to bust out the flask.
Great. Well, listen, this is Tim's... This isn't your most recent, or is it?
Yes, I'm working on 2 books right now, but obviously... I guess you can't really call them the most recent.
You can talk about that if you want. Let me just first say this, that I actually received this book just last Thursday, I think it was, in the mail. And this is a Monday that we're filming this. And I thought, oh man, 350 page book. I'm going to have to work to get through this. It went like that. I really enjoyed it. The book was really, kept me on the edge of my seat. So it was a fun read. And it's called The Attack of the Vyperians by Tim Savage. And so I wouldn't mind talking about this a little, lead off talking about this book.
Yeah, please do.
Well, why don't you talk about it?
You probably know more about. I don't think I've like even looked inside the pages in over a year. So you probably know more about it than I do.
I know that feeling. So you couldn't share with me your inspiration behind this?
Yeah, so the book, it's called Attack of the Vyperians, and I mean, I guess there's really no better way to say it than it's kind of cheesy, but it's cheesy on purpose. And it was inspired, so it's basically about a bunch of intergalactic space octopuses that come to Earth to steal our women. And it's based...
Not ours, incidentally, just...
Earth's women, right? Not my women. And so it's based on. I grew up with all the really old science fiction movies, and I'm talking about the serials from the 20s, 30s, and 40s, Undersea Kingdom, Radar Men from the Moon, all of those old 12-chapter serials they would play before other movies at the cinema, and from that all the way up until Creature from the Black Lagoon, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, all the Godzilla movies, all the other big Toho Japanese monster movies, the Mysterians, and so on and so forth. And so I absolutely loved those as a kid. And I've been writing a lot of stuff off and on throughout my entire adult life, and started in radio when I was 18 and worked in radio for a while and did a lot of writing for that. And went to Hollywood and was an actor and comedian down there for a number of years. And so it was always different types of short form things that I would write. And I got to a point in my life when I was in Los Angeles, and I had a couple screenplays that I had written and a lot of sketches, and I was writing for a lot of comedians down there and doing stuff on my own, but so much of the stuff just never got finished because, you know, when you're working on something like a screenplay, well, I mean, the chances that it'll ever get made are probably literally 1 in a million. And so I had a lot of friends that had amazing screenplays that they wrote, and you're reading this, and you get done, and they're looking for feedback, and you get done, and you're just like, this is great, but unless someone gives you $200 million, you're never going to get to see it finished. And, you know, so, and you probably relate to that as well as a singer-songwriter. If you can do it yourself, you get the satisfaction of finality to it, to be able to say, I wrote this, I'm playing it myself. And that's kind of the same thought that I had with the book. And I had these screenplays that I really wanted to make, and I could even make them kind of cheap, but kind of cheap for a movie is still a couple $100,000. Mm-hmm. So I thought, you know, and I was in a place in my life where I just really wanted to have something that I could finish and say, I did it, and like it's done, and there's nothing more I can do with it. and now I can move on to something else. And that was the impetus for writing my first novel. And so that's exactly what I did. And at the time, I was in a really tough space in my life. I had just pitched a TV show to a bunch of networks and got rejected in the most LA way possible. And I had a really bad family tragedy. And the last thing I wanted to do was think about anything involving reality. And so I kind of just went back to this time in my childhood where you have these big monsters and they're crushing the cities, and you got these aliens, and it's goofy and it's funny. And that was it. So that was how I came to the decision to make that my first novel and just put the nose to the grindstone and get it finished.
You said something, you were rejected in the most LA way possible. I don't know what that means.
I'll break it down for you. You walk in, you meet somebody that you recognize from the movies, probably one of the biggest movie stars or a producer or something. They look you in the eye and say, you are the next Johnny Carson. You are a genius, and we are going to make you rich and famous. And they shake your hand, and they say, write this, this, and this for us. And you walk out of there, and on your way to your day job that you know you're going to quit because you finally made it, and they send you emails and they call you and they tell you that you're the next big thing, and all of a sudden one day it just stops and nobody will answer your calls and you have no reason. You gave them everything they asked for and more, and you show up and say, hey, you are just given some FaceTime, and they don't know who you are, and you can't get to see any of the people that gave you their personal phone numbers 2 weeks earlier. And that's kind of that's what I mean by that. And I went through that probably like 4 times. And you realize like that's just how it works. Like everyone says, and that's why like you hear about these like celebrities that kind of go off the deep end, but it's because they really make you feel like you are the most amazing thing in the world, as long as you can make them money. And then it turns off like this, so it's like this insanity that you have to live in. No one ever tells you no. You never hear no. Yeah. You hear, we're going to give you $1 million in an office next to Ashton Kutcher, and just tell us what we need to do to make this happen. You're the best, you're a genius, you're the funniest person we've ever met. And then like they don't answer your call 2 hours from them. So that's that.
You're going to have to carry around a contract in your back pocket.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yep.
So how many books have you?
So this is the only book that has been finished thus far and actually like out there and available. I'm currently working on 2 other books. One is a nonfiction book about, it's a combination of, I got started in radio when I was 18, like I said, and I was like a big radio personality in my hometown, and then actually moved up to Portland to do that. And so it's a combination of that and dealing with mental illness at the same time. So that was also, I have OCD, and it's moderate to severe, but I have spent a lot of time and energy to really just learn how to live with it and learn how to have a happy and fulfilling life in spite of it. But at this stage in my life, that couldn't have been further than what was going on. And so it's kind of this combination of this homeschooled, naive child thrown into the world of rock and roll radio, and then also plunging into madness at the same time. So that's the nonfiction book that I'm working on. And then I also have a new novel that's getting most of my attention right now, and it's a crime thriller based in Florida that has 5 interweaving stories about a tent revival preacher and an illegal butt implant ring and Miami strip clubs and alligator wrestling and everything that makes Florida what Florida is.
So you wouldn't necessarily consider yourself a science fiction writer?
I wouldn't. I love science fiction. I would not classify, I wouldn't say that I'm solely that. I like unique stories, and I like, really bizarre things. And I think that if I get to a point where I can take some of this bizarre stuff that I've experienced and also some of the stuff that goes on in my head and make it palatable enough for people, that might be something that I can one day make a living off of.
Tone it down a little. Yeah. So you said homeschooled, and home is
Florida.
Florida.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
Yeah.
your next book will be going home.
Exactly. So yeah, and a lot of the stuff that's in that book is, and that's kind of the thing. It's like there's a lot of stuff in there that I have had to pull back on that has actually happened to me and that I've experienced. That I tell people, and they're like, that's not real. Like, you didn't do that. Like, you didn't. There's not a church where people hold rattlesnakes and like beg them to bite them, and pray that the rattlesnakes won't kill them. Like, yep, that's a thing. So it's kind of, you got to kind of learn how to. I have had to learn how to tell stories in a way that, that doesn't water that down, but doesn't, but presents it in a way that is digestible by, putting a spoon of sugar on the, on the meatloaf.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe that's not a good metaphor.
We finish with that image, and then we'll go on. So you have two projects going right now, a nonfiction and a fiction. Is this common in your writing? Do you have juggle multiple works of art?
I often do, and so in addition to that, I also still do some comedy stuff that's online. I've got a sizable, I should say a small but rabid following for some of the comedy stuff that I do online. And then I also have been getting into just kind of hobby photography and going back and forth. And that's it's kind of like a symptom of the OCD. So like there's a big part of the OCD that's obsessive, obviously for the obsessive compulsive. So there's a tendency that I have to fixate on things. But because of that, I will switch to things to keep myself from going too far down the rabbit hole. And you probably relate to this, like, as a songwriter, you probably get an instance where you've got this line, this lyric, and it's kind of there, but it's not, and you drive yourself crazy trying to get it, and you spend an hour, 2 hours. The next thing you know, you spent 3 days on 5 words. And so that's kind of something that I deal with all the time. And so I've kind of devised these ways to kind of jump around from thing to thing. And for me, it's beneficial to have 8 things going at one time versus completely focusing on one thing.
Boy, I hear you, brother.
Yeah.
I found that the best way for myself, rather than obsessing on that, is leave it alone, and all of a sudden it'll come to you somewhere else. So,
Yeah.
So, were you always an artist then? You followed movies. You were really into movies when you were young, but were you always doing art?
Yeah. My mother's an artist, and my father's actually a writer. And so I grew up with that. And I actually painted and drew until I was about 11 or 12, and then I just completely switched to writing, and I'm pretty sure that was a subconscious way of rebelling against my mother. I'm like, Mom paints, I'm not painting anymore. And so I switched to writing when I was about 12, and had always, from that point on, had always just written short stories and essays and that kind of thing. And so that for me has become something that's been more, but it's the thing about art. Like pretty much all art is this kind of temporary. It's like the best of all worlds of like taking a quick vacation and venting your frustrations and working out problems and issues in your head, and it just explodes into whatever medium you're doing it with, as a way that I don't think is matched by just about anything else. You're able to cure so many things inside of you by externalizing them into whatever art that you want to create. And I mean, it's something that I'm really appreciative of being a human, being able to, because I'm sure people that get frustrated, and you're like, if that person just knew how to like make a basic song or paint a picture or write some words down, they'd be a lot less frustrated in daily life. They'd have their crap together a little bit more. So I do feel lucky and blessed that, and it may not even be any good, but at least I can do it and put it out there and have that as something that I can put all of that stuff into.
So a lot of it is dealing with internal issues. Are there things outside in the world that inspire you? Whether it's weather or politics or music or...
Yeah, absolutely. And pretty much all of that stuff. I remember reading, this could have been, I can't remember where I got this from, it could have been an old acting coach or I read it somewhere, but it was something like, you know, there's this romanticism of the artist where it's like, well, if I solve all my problems, I'll never be able to create great art anymore. And the response to that was, there's always a chance you'll get stuck in traffic, and that it can make you angry enough to, you know, go write a song. The song might not be about traffic, but you'll still get that, you know, still get worked up, you know, and have the passion.
I think we can rest assured there'll always be problems.
Yeah, especially now.
Theo, Coco has a question.
Coco, what do you got?
So going along with that question, what inspires you? How does social media affect your writing?
Can you be more specific in terms of like inspiration or?
You know, Coco's a mannequin. Don't ask too much.
That's a good point. Yeah. Honestly, I try to stay off of social media. I used to have a Twitter account. I'm not on Facebook anymore. Every once in a while I'll go on and then I'll come off. I really can't stand it. I am personally disgusted by the way that, oh man, how do I put this? We are evolving so fast and things are changing so quickly that like things that were relevant 2 years ago don't even like mean anything anymore. And I heard, again, somewhere else, the problem with social media is that we become curators of our own museum. And so what that means specifically is we can choose what side we want to show the rest of the world, and it's not reality. And so Facebook is a perfect example of that. I had to get off of Facebook because everything on there was either look how amazing my life is or look how terrible my life is, and nobody was saying anything that was real. And I tend to be pretty sensitive for stuff, like most people don't have that issue, I think, when they just like look at it and they're like, oh, so-and-so's complaining again or whatever, but it like really gets to me and like gets inside me. And so I try to like stay off of social media because of that. But the problem with being an artist is, that's what everybody says, is like, well, social media is where you've got to get your work out and show it to people. And so it's kind of a catch-22 because I think artists are, so I don't think it's obvious, artists are sensitive, more sensitive in general anyway. So you've got this constant battle of protecting your vulnerable side and not letting too much negativity in, but also trying to network and trying to get out there and trying to get things in front of people, because art without an audience is, you know, kind of depressing, and everyone wants somebody to appreciate what they do.
Yeah. Thanks, Coco.
Thank you, Coco.
We got some more, huh?
How do you feel about the Portland literary scene?
I've gone to a couple meetings of writing groups, and so there's some great writers in Portland, and there's some great unpublished writers in Portland, and as a whole, a couple of the meetings that I went to were a lot of people that it never even got to the work. It was kind of what you were talking about, social media. So like everyone was just talking about like how they can get more followers on Twitter and how they can push stuff. And so honestly, I haven't been into a situation yet where I've been in like a work critique group or something like that. But there's an author, which most people are probably familiar with, Chuck Palahniuk, that I used to, when I worked in radio, I used to talk to on a regular basis. And he actually kind of got the ball rolling for me to talk more about my personal stuff. And that's kind of how I got started in my radio book, was a conversation that I had with him. And so he's awesome. Who's the science fiction author, Ursula Le Guin? She's fantastic, and I like a lot of her stuff. But as far as like a network, and that's another thing about artists, we don't like the network. We like our friends, but we don't like to go into group situations and hobnob with people that we don't know and say, here's this stuff that I created, and here's this. It's like we kind of prefer to just kind of sit in the corner and watch everyone else. But again, that's not how you're gonna get your stuff out there.
Boy, you can speak for me anytime. You said something earlier that was kind of curious to me. Your mother was a writer and your father an artist.
Reversed.
Reversed. Okay. Did they discourage you at all, knowing what you know now about how tough this?
Well, neither of them ever. Yeah. So, boy, that's another interesting question. I grew up in the shadow of my dad writing every day, 2 to 3 hours, because again we were homeschooled. So he would leave and go to McDonald's, which is a strange place to write. And he would go to McDonald's for 2 or 3 hours every morning. He hitchhiked across the country multiple times to go to book fairs. It took him 20 years to get his first book published. And even then it was because he paid money to get it published to a company. And so I basically grew up with him having the discipline and the habit to go out there and do it all day, every day for years, but not see results. So that in itself was enough to probably either discourage me or let me know. And that was another big thing about ultimately when I decided to leave LA and made a couple decisions for myself. Like, I can't create art for the possibility of making money anymore. And maybe it'll happen one day, but I honestly don't care. And so I have a decent day job now. I don't need money from the stuff that I create, and I don't know, because I've been in a position where I've actually lived, when I was a comedian, I made enough money for a span to live off of it. And I was more miserable then than I'd ever been in my life, because you're not creating for yourself anymore, and you have to come to the conclusion that you have to sell out one way or another. Either you're selling out to the corporations or you're selling out to the fans. And that was the even harder one, when like you put out like a new piece of content or a video, and then all the fans are just like, this sucks. This isn't like the other videos. This is terrible. And then they turn on you, and and it becomes this mental mind screw where you have to go back to the drawing board and figure out what you're doing it for and why you're doing it. So, and I think all of that kind of came into play from that and my upbringing, and just seeing my parents never really, to put all that work into it, never really have it pan out. When it hit me that I should just do it because I want to do it, not because I am trying to make it, I think that was like a big relief for me and a big weight off my shoulders.
Boy, that's a good lesson. So you mentioned something earlier about your comic background. You were making a living as that. Were you a stand-up comic, or?
Actually, it was YouTube, and so I had a lot of characters and videos that I had started on YouTube. And again, like I'm sure you understand, everybody's like, oh, all this overnight success kind of stuff, but probably the first 100 videos and 3 years, I was averaging 12 views a video. And then all of a sudden one video hit. There was this website called Dig back in the day. It was like a pre-Reddit. And one of the videos got on there and got 500,000 views in a day. And that was kind of like the first little bump. And then, it just kind of went like this and then leveled off. And then all of a sudden, same thing. It went skyrocketed. And over the course of a couple months, I had like 4 million views on a few different videos. And the YouTube partnership was set up. So if you sign up to have ads on there and you do your partnership thing, you would get, I think, 40% of the revenue. So I was making like $3,000 a month just off of YouTube ads. And then because of that, I got like sponsorship stuff, and I got like small little gigs, and was able to kind of parlay that into a couple different things. And that also led to, some agents contacting me and some, different opportunities to pop up. So it, it all kind of cascades at that point from that overnight success.
So it took you about 5 years to become an overnight success?
Exactly. And yeah. So it was, and like I said, everything that fell into it afterward was very confusing. And all of a sudden, you're not making content that you want to make anymore. You're like trying to take into account all of these things, producers and agents saying, well, your character shouldn't say this, or you shouldn't do this, or you're going to cause a controversy, but this is good controversy, but this is a bad controversy, and don't say this word, but say, and all of a sudden you're just like, what? I just wanted to like turn on a camera and like make jokes. Yeah. I didn't want to have to take all of this stuff into account. So yeah, that's where that came from.
No, fun. So that would lead me to, you obviously still have those up on on the net?
Nope, I took those down, as a matter of fact. It's been an on-again, off-again thing for a while. The main character is like kind of this trashy trailer park kind of guy, and I still pop in and say hello every once in a while, but I'm kind of focusing on more stuff, different stuff now, and it ran its course. I mean, it's 10 years. I was thinking about it, was 10 years ago this month that I made the first video, and the peak was probably 4 or 5 years ago, and that was, it was an interesting time, but time to move on.
Your website.
Yep.
Why don't you share your website? What's up on it?
So,
any of these videos can be found, or?
I do have some videos that I just do as myself, talking about some crazy stories from my life. The 6 months I spent living with an Italian gangster and selling stolen computer chips out of Compton. The 75-year-old roommate I had at one point that tried to kill me in my sleep. So, fun stories about being broke and starving artist in Los Angeles. And that's all on, so I have my main website, it's timnasium.com, and it's like gymnasium except with Tim instead of the gym, so timnasium.com. And then it also links to my book website for Attack of the Vyperians off of that, and I have started posting like just short blog entries from time to time too, so.
You'll keep us posted on the next book
Yep.
when it comes out?
Yep. So hopefully I'll get the rough draft of that finished later on this summer, and then start shopping it around, and see if I can get a publishing deal for that one and see what happens.
I wish you luck on that.
Thank you.
That's great. Once again, I really enjoyed your book, and I thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Theo.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.